Well, welcome everybody. Good afternoon. It's Mike, your host with another episode of Insider Secrets. And that's brought to you by My Core Intentions. And, I always ask, have you been thinking about your intentions? What are your intentions? What are you looking to accomplish for yourself? One of the things I always work on with people is the fact that you need to be crystal clear on your why you're doing something. I know that our guest today is pretty clear on why he chose property management, the route he took, and why he does it. One thing that we work with our clients at My Core Intentions is how do we help you to create cash flow on a short-term basis and long-term wealth, and while we empower you to execute sound real estate principles and strategies. And property management principles and strategies are really important in how we live a quality, more balanced lifestyle. Tony, why don't you say hi to our guests real quick?
How you doing, everybody? It's Tony.
Tony, it's great to have you. Everybody, I am joined today by my friend and real estate professional, property management professional, Tony LeBlanc. He is considered to be the doorpreneur, and he wrote a book that's called The Doorpreneur, and we're going to talk about that today. But Tony grew up living in an apartment that his mother managed on Canada's East Coast, where he developed his passion for property management. Watching her natural ability to inspire a sense of ownership and accountability, Tony owns and manages Ground Floor Property Management, one of the largest property management companies on Canada's East Coast, a business he built from the ground up. How appropriate for a name. In addition, he created numerous spin-off companies, living and working with doorpreneur mindset. Tony's desire to share his story as a business owner and property management professional has helped thousands of his peers achieve new levels of growth and profitability. Tony, here's what I'd like you to do. In one word, can you tell our listeners what inspires you about the property management business?
Expansion.
Expansion.
Yes.
Well, interesting. That must be great for cash flow and helping your owners make a little bit more money.
Yep.
Give us your backstory, Tony. Tell us a little bit about who you are and how you wound up in the business, other than following your mom's example.
Absolutely. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak in here and have a conversation with you.
Yeah, you bet.
So my background, as you kind of quickly alluded to, I started very young in this world of property management. I was raised for the first 16 years of my life in the same apartment building where my mother was the resident manager and also the VP of the management company that owned the building. So from a very early age, and I have many, many childhood experiences kind of surrounded around this concept of an apartment building. I started helping my mom with various chores very early, talking with tenants and knowing everybody in the building. So that community type environment. And I was also thankfully exposed to as I got a little bit older and understanding to the world of owning and investing in apartment buildings and what it had done for the owners of the company where my mothers worked. Because they were, when I was young, they were considered like, these guys are really rich, they're really wealthy, and they own all these buildings. How do they do it? Like, what's the magic behind all this stuff? So that was ingrained in me very, very early on. So as I kind of grew out of high school, I went to college. Property management or real estate wasn't my first thing that I got into. I actually was a software engineer for 15 years with IBM. Wow. So technology was my first passion. I had an unbelievable career with IBM, was able to travel the world. I got to work with some of the biggest companies on this planet, and it was an amazing, amazing experience. However, throughout my career, there was always something that I felt was missing, and that was owning and doing my own thing. And throughout the years, I kind of dabbed my foot into a lot of different things. I owned a supplement company. I got into financial services, all sorts of things that I tried kind of as a side hustle. And although I kind of did well in all of them, nothing really gave me or spoke to the kind of purpose and the why and the passion in terms of what I wanted to do as my next life thing. So after having a discussion with a colleague one night sitting by a fire, and I'm like, I don't know what to do as this next big idea. And of course, he came to me and said, well, dude, why aren't you doing what like you grew up with, property management? And I'll be completely honest, I never even thought of it. I started investing in buildings pretty early. I bought my first building at 23, but I never actually thought I would get into the management business. And ever since he kind of put that seed in my mind, I took the necessary next actions and steps to be able to get me to where I am today. So we run a fairly, I left my career with IBM to run my own management company. We've grown that to around 2,000 doors, 3 locations throughout the Eastern Atlantic Canada. And we've taken that management portfolio and done something rather special with it, to where we've incubated and grown 7 other service companies around that portfolio of business. And then that's when the whole concept of the Doorpreneur came to life, and the book, and what I'm doing now, and is working and coaching other property managers to do the same.
That's interesting. And I always say, nobody's born into the business, right? There's something happens along the way. And I think your story is a little bit like mine. You learn from your mom. Your mom set this example. I always tell this story. I was 8 years old. I was on vacation with my family, and I'm sitting on the edge of a swimming pool, and my family had no background in real estate. And I asked my dad about the hotel that we were staying at and all the doors. And he said, oh, people come here and they vacation just like us. They stay here and they pay somebody money. And it was at that point I knew I wanted somebody to pay me the money. So I wanted to own the building, right?
Absolutely.
But nobody's born into real estate, I don't think. They wind up growing into it.
Yeah, I definitely think it's becoming, it's a lot more, obviously a lot more popular nowadays, I find, within real estate and the realtor world. Property management is still something that's very, I want to say, you don't hear a lot of it. It's not as mainstream as the real estate world and real estate investing and realtors, but is becoming more and more important as bigger cities and larger cities are becoming more and more, there's more density being built. So you're seeing bigger buildings being built, more apartments. So the more need for property managers to be able to take care of these properties. So, and specifically property management is not something, it's very hard and it's very rough. So usually it's the type of career that's either it's kind of in the family, or somebody doing it. Then you get exposed to it and you kind of get into it. Otherwise, it's kind of like this unknown entity. People don't know a lot about what we do at all.
So talk about your portfolio a little bit. Are you, obviously you do third-party management. It's not just managing the properties you own.
Correct.
And is it residential and scattered house, or is it commercial apartments? Tell us about your portfolio.
Sure. So we are mostly multifamily. So we do, we love the bigger, the better apartment buildings. So whether if it's a triplex, fourplex, 6-unit, 12-unit, or 124-unit residential complex, that's our bread and butter. That's what we love and what we have a lot of. That being said, we still cater to single family investors, smaller duplexes, triplexes, we still take care of. And we also do commercial. So we take care of mostly office space and retail. So we've dabbled into industrial a little bit, but I would say that 95% of our portfolio is comprised of multifamily, various sizes, and the rest would be commercial.
Okay.
Yep.
And you talked about your 7 ancillary companies. Do you want to expand on that a little bit for us? Sure. Tell us what those are and how those came to be.
Yeah. So the first 5 years of my management company, I define as my door chasing years. So I started my business with the idea and the dream of creating the biggest property management company in Canada. And to do that, I knew I needed a lot of doors. So the city that I live in is 150,000 people. It's not a big city, but I was very well connected because of my mother. So I knew I had a lot of ins with a lot of different people. So these first 3 or 4 years was all about accumulating doors, getting new management over and over again. And after about, again, going into year 5, it really started to wear on me. in terms of just kind of doing the same thing over and over again. And it kind of lost its luster for what it was providing me. We were growing so fast that a lot of other things were kind of being put aside, like, building out great systems, great training, just different experiences with our tenants and with our owners. So right around that mark, we kind of put the brakes on a lot of the growth aspects of the business. And we're like, okay, we need to step back and solidify a lot of the systems. But I'm like, is this it? Is this all that property management has to offer in terms of I'm just constantly bringing in doors and I just bring in these buildings all the time? It's like, is that it? And I came to the realization that it may be it for a lot of people, but I wasn't really satisfied where things were at. So one day we myself and my partner, we took out and we printed out all of the different expense sheets for all of our properties across the board. We wanted to see where the money was being spent throughout all the different properties that we managed. And we quickly came under the realization that we were spending a ton of money in landscaping and snow removal services. And it just so happens that these two same vendors were the biggest pains in our butts in terms of dealing with babysitting and just going back and forth. And, you didn't mow this right. You didn't push the snow in the right area. And we were just like, we kind of looked at hummed and hawed in that over some time. And then one evening I was watching TV and I saw the show called Undercover Boss. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
Yep.
And there was a landscaping company on it called the Grounds Guys. And they were featured on the program. And I'm like, wow, these guys are like amazing. And the service and this, and I was just blown away by the infomercial. Right after the show, I went online, I started Googling these guys, and lo and behold, they're Canadian. The franchise was built not far from where I live, like a 2-hour flight. So it's far enough, but close enough.
Right.
And that's where it all started. We ended up buying into the franchise, and that's when we started our first full-fledged new outside service other than the management. So the whole Doorpreneur strategy is twofold. The first stage is to build a great management company. So we fixed that. We always ran one, but we solidified it before we kind of branched off. The second part is to find a new service that you can incubate within your own portfolio. So essentially you're cutting your own teeth. So we bought the landscaping franchise, and then we start doing our own properties. We start pushing the snow and mowing the lawn of all our properties, giving our owners better deals and giving us better control of the level of service that we were having throughout our properties.
Sure.
So it was a win-win for everybody. We cut our teeth for about a year, and then the final and third strategy of the Doorpreneur is to then take that service to the general public. Now we're no longer limited to our own rent roll. We could then grow the business exponentially throughout the general offering. The big aha moment came about 2 years later when the landscaping and snow removal company was twice the size of my management company. That's when I knew we had something. That's when I knew something was special. And at that point, we had spun off a few more things like our residential cleaning, commercial and residential cleaning. We do mold, fire, remediation. We do sales now, real estate sales. And in the last 3 months, we just bought a concrete business and we bought an appliance repair business, all through the same strategies of whether if it's through acquisition or starting organically. You're obviously we're now running a great management company. So now it's about incubating these new services within the management portfolio and then opening up to general public. And then that's when the Doorpreneur concept was born. And I wrote the book last year.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
What a great story, though. I've always thought that the property management business was one of those businesses you could have all these ancillary companies in,
Yep.
and have revenue from because you are paying so many other people to do things.
Yep.
So your goal was to be the largest property management company in Canada, and how's that going for you?
It's completely shifted. I no longer want to be the biggest management company. I quickly realized property management is difficult. It's a very grinding type business. It has a lot of amazing components to it, So we started with one location, then we opened up 2 other locations. And I quickly became aware of the difficulties of running secondary and tertiary locations from where I was sitting. And I looked at the numbers. And in terms of from an economic standpoint, it made more sense for me to continue expanding and buying new businesses where I was versus continuing to expand on the property management perspective.
Mm.
And so that made more sense to us because we could control things better. The margins were better on some of the things that we were doing. And then obviously when the book came out, that brought on a whole new level of format in terms of where I was going. So everything we built in house, we now consider like we're kind of like the testing ground for a lot of this stuff. And now that the book has come out, we were able to put that out. And now really the focus is continuing to grow where we are in terms of the management portfolio. We're always looking to grow that. We're always looking for great businesses to buy. But now the ultimate strategy and the legacy component of what I'm building is to now teach this program to other property managers, because all of this was done for a very specific reason. So we started this podcast about you talking about having a strong why. So for me, the why behind all of this is tied to my experience with my mother, and in terms of how the property management industry is seen from the general public. For the most part, a lot of people don't understand our industry, and the other part is they see it with a negative connotation. They think of slumlords. They just don't see it in the same light that someone that's in it sees it.
Right.
And that always really bothered me, because I seen how hard my mother worked and how much people loved her, and I saw the impact that she had, and I'm like, how do I take that feeling and interpret it in such a way that I can bring it to other people, and they see they see this industry differently than they see it today. And that all came to fruition when this doorpreneur model was born, because as we were growing and expanding our businesses, our personalities and the way that people saw us locally as property managers shifted tremendously. They started seeing us as real entrepreneurs. They started to see the logic behind what we were doing, and everything changed for us in terms of how people interacted with us, the opportunities that came to us, the different caliber of investors that we were getting coming to us in terms of managing their properties and portfolios. It was no longer just the duplexes and the triplex. We were getting institutional people now coming to us saying, can you take care of an entire portfolio in a different city? That's a totally different discussion or conversation with somebody. And none of that would have been possible without kind of, I think, the framework that we've built. And I desperately want that for other property managers, and I want that for the industry. I want us to be seen as the top priority, in my opinion. Obviously I'm biased, in terms of the level of importance that's needed in this industry. And right now, realtors get a lot of that attention, when I think that property managers are, they're undervalued, and they just don't get a lot of that limelight. And I think through doing this, I've proven it, and I'm now proving it with my clients.
Yeah. Interesting. You know, one thing that I picked up in what you were talking about is I believe that every good business knows its numbers. And the one thing I'm hearing you talk about is that you know your numbers.
Absolutely.
That landscaping budget where you were outsourcing that so much, it made more sense to bring it in-house because you could capture the revenue. And, you know, I think that's, a lot of times I don't feel people look at their business enough and say, hey, you know, I can make more money here. I can tweak this. Here's what I want to ask you. What is the best secret that you have with your owners that you manage their property for increasing their revenue?
I think you always got to be looking at the numbers. I think there's a lot of different situations where property managers will try to hide from that. So communication is critically important with your owners. So one of the things that we do with all of our larger investors is have a monthly review meeting of the financials versus budget versus actuals. It's to actually sit down and have a conversation about where we are, where we're going, capital expenditures, anything that comes up, whatever the case may be. But these one-on-one meetings are incredibly valuable, not only for us as the managers, because I've got 150 different owners that I deal with. It's hard to keep track of what everybody's, what other things that they want to have done. But this is a monthly situation where I can sit with them and understand, and it brings me back to the numbers, where how the building is performing. And then, we can kind of make better informed decisions from there. So I don't know so much of it's a secret, but I know a lot of people are scared to communicate this stuff with their owners, and they'll shy away from it because they maybe know that the building is underperforming and they don't want to get yelled at. And so for us, it's a matter of, I would much rather have that conversation on a monthly basis to keep us on track and to keep everybody accountable. So if I said I'm going to do something, then I'm going to be held accountable for that. And the same thing goes for the owner. If the owner says that, okay, I'm going to do XYZ renovations for this property or for this unit, and I need to keep him accountable too, right? So I think it goes both ways.
Yeah. How about amenities? Do you have an amenity that you like to put in that might not be in place in an apartment complex that you manage, that all of a sudden you put an amenity in and it creates, some additional capital or revenue coming in? Do you have a favorite amenity?
Prop tech is becoming a hot word right now in the multifamily space. So we've done it on a few different projects, and it was very lucrative for the owners. So they went in and put in an internet-based system in the building. So instead of each unit going with their own provider, they would go in, put in some capital, put in some infrastructure in terms of providing Wi-Fi as part of the rent. So they're, perhaps they're charging an extra 40 or 50 bucks a month in rent, and the cost to be able to provide that Wi-Fi service to them is maybe 10 or 15. So that's been a great spread for some owners. The only issue has been the infrastructure cost to put these things together. Sometimes is the ROI can be, a few years before they actually see the full return.
Sure.
But the guys that have gotten past that have had, they've raved about it. Another one is tenant insurance packages. That's something that we've done as a property management company. We've gone out and partnered with an insurance broker to be able to handle all of our tenant insurance needs throughout all of our properties. So if an individual owner has a large enough portfolio, or that they work with a property manager that doesn't have something like that together, that's something that's worth a very good discussion, because the margins can be very nice with something like that.
Do you require your tenants to have renter's insurance? Is it part of the lease?
It is. Yep. So there's kind of twofold. So tenant insurance is when you don't have it, that's, of course, you get, if there's a fire or something that happens, a flood, the biggest issue all the time is the tenant, they have nowhere to go, or if, they have expenses to cover their moving and all that stuff. And if they don't have insurance and they're not covered, stuff can get expensive. So obviously tenant insurance is put in place to be able to cover situations like that, to cover their belongings. We make that mandatory for their well-being, because we've been on the other side of having, we had a 54 unit, had a massive fire. I had 13 apartments that were affected and gutted, and about 11 of those had no tenant insurance, and they had absolutely nowhere to go. It was heartbreaking. And we're like, I can't do this. It's like, we gotta, it's almost like we had to make a decision for them to make sure that this stuff is mandatory. The other interesting component is when you make it mandatory and you get 100% participation in a building, the insurance premiums for that building owner will typically drastically decrease.
Yep. It's a big spread. So do you bake it into the lease, or do you, okay, so it's part of the lease then, so it's required and they just have to do it anyhow.
Yep.
How many units do you guys manage?
Close to 2,000.
Okay. That's a pretty good sized portfolio, especially when you start to add all the rest of the ancillary products and services that you give. How about this? Talk about marketing, Tony. So if you were going into the property management business today, or were looking to go out and seek new business and new units to manage, what are your best marketing techniques for that?
It's a little bit different. So there's, depending on where you are, there's a lot of people that try to emphasize the technology aspect in terms of doing online digital marketing, social media, all that stuff. There's a place for that, but my strategy has always been, I find it's giving me the best return, and it's getting the best return for a lot of my students, is becoming known as the expert and the authority in your community in all things apartments. So you want to know who owns the buildings. You want to know where the buildings are. You want to know as much about all of that real estate in your local city as you can. And it's then your job to go out there and to make sure that those building owners know who you are. And that, there's tons of different ways that you can get in front of people, whether if it's from networking at local events, sending out any type of mailers to the property owners, finding out who they are, going to search them on LinkedIn or Facebook, find out where they work out, and actually getting in front of these people. Real estate investing typically is it's a knit community, right? It's like a small niche in pretty much any city you go into. Right. So find out the local real estate investor clubs, find out talk to the realtors that deal with multifamily and investing, and start putting yourself out there. And you've got to market yourself as an industry leader and expert. So it's all about education is a big platform in terms of educating people on how things work within property management and the real estate. And again, it's just super critical to be out there and not afraid to again, that's where the social media component comes in, to be able to put yourself out there in terms of being known as that guy. I know for me, 10 years ago, when I started Ground Floor, I made myself one promise. It's like from the social perspective, I will be known. If there's any conversation to be had about renting an apartment, my name has to come up. That was my goal.
That's interesting.
Doesn't matter who it's with. And to this day, I still get investors that come to us. They'll email me from Toronto, the other side of the country, and they'll say, well, I've spoke to 3 other realtors and they all gave me your name. And I'm like, that's the results that I want.
That's name recognition. That's what everybody strives for. I know when I sold residential real estate, that's what I strived for, is that people in the community would know my name.
Yep.
Because maybe they saw a billboard or a park bench or something, right?
Yep. So there's a lot of micro, strategies that you can put in place to get your name out there, to get known. But again, there's nothing more important in the startup phase than kind of your, feet on the street, driving the neighborhoods in the streets, knowing the buildings, recognizing, taking a picture of it, going home and researching who owns it, finding that person on LinkedIn and sending them a message, say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Building owner, my name's Tony, I'm with Ground Floor Property Management. Passed by your building the other day, take a quick snapshot or send them a video live from on the property. Saw your building, loved it. If you're ever in the market for a property manager, would love to have a conversation with you. Yeah. That's it. It's non-threatening,
Right. Third party approach, very easy. Not, I like that non-threatening approach, right?
Yep.
So how is the environment today? Here we sit in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic, worldwide, deal going on. How is the environment for you today? And what's changed? What do you see the future is going to look like?
Mm-hmm. It's been an interesting 6 months. I'll tell you that. We were shaking in our boots in March. I'll tell you, we didn't know what was going to happen in April. But I will say now that we're, going into September, COVID hasn't impacted my management company whatsoever. The government here in Canada has kind of stepped up, and they did so in a great way, in my perspective, in terms of helping people with funds, with money, to be able to get them through this experience. So the months of May and June were our record. We broke every record we had in terms of arrears. Everybody's paying on time and everybody's paying early. Yeah. We're like, wow. So that was really good. So in terms of that front, in terms of late payment rents and evictions and stuff like that, we really were not impacted. Now, I know that there's a lot of places in the world that were affected gratefully, and there's a lot of states that have come down with some pretty tough regulations in terms of evictions memorandums and all that type of stuff. Personally, we haven't experienced that, so we're extremely lucky. The biggest shifts are in the way that we're now running our operations. So before, we used to have, when we'd rent an apartment, you'd have showings. You'd actually go with people to show them an apartment or a building. Then if they liked it, they would apply for the building, and we do our vetting and screening and so forth. That's now completely shifted. If somebody's now interested in an apartment, the first thing they have to do is apply for the apartment. If and only they are approved, then we book them in for a showing, because we're trying to reduce obviously the foot traffic going into apartments, and we want to make sure that we're not wasting anybody's time going into units that we don't need to. So that's been a massive change.
Yeah.
Video showings, FaceTime, Zoom sessions obviously is taking over everything. A lot of people now would almost rather do either a FaceTime showing or just watch the videos to rent the apartments. Now, there's still a lot that actually want to go see it, and we accommodate that, but it's been very good for us, because previously we needed a lot more staff to be able to do the showings and all that stuff. Now, to where we're doing all the screening and filtering on the front end and only bring in the qualified, interested people, has greatly reduced my labor in terms of what I got to put into that. So that's been really good. That's probably what I would say has been the biggest shift, and being more mindful of our surroundings and from the maintenance perspective. For the first couple of months when COVID just came in, we were only doing emergencies only for maintenance. Now that where I live, we're pretty much, things have kind of gone back to normal. So we have zero cases. We've had 0 cases for quite a while, and our maintenance guys are now, it's much more liberty to do kind of business as usual. So, but we still have that hanging above us to make sure that everybody has the right gear and PPE equipment to make sure that we can keep everybody safe.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Interesting. So I don't know that anybody really has a good answer of where we're headed. I know there's a lot of speculation, but what's interesting is I talked to another property manager yesterday, and he said that July was their best month collection wise, and the least amount of economic vacancies that they've had in a long time. And it's amazing to me, we've got people not working again, unemployment that's gone up, and people are paying their rent. So it's really kind of cool. I think the world has come together in the midst of all this too.
You know what? It's funny. I had this one more thought along this line, because you just triggered something. Our vacancy rate is like less than 1% right now. We're going through the environment is fantastic. So less people are moving. So that's a big factor. And I'm guessing that's pretty much all over the place.
Yeah.
People are only moving if they absolutely have to, if they're being, for whatever reason. So you're seeing a lot less turns happen throughout the market. And I think that's going to continue for a while. And I think because you mentioned in terms of the market being on fire, we're also seeing the investment component of this on fire as well. We're seeing like record, number of multifamilies and buildings being sold in record time and pricing, because I think there's a lot more investors that have a little bit more time on their hands, and they're at home analyzing properties and they're buying stuff. The people that have the money had the money last year, they had it 6 months ago, and they'll have it a year or two from now, right? Those are the people that are prepared. And there's a lot of people that experienced 2007 and 2008, that roller coaster, that have been sitting on cash. They're maybe they've been waiting for opportunity like this to happen. And it's happening. There's going to be more and more deals come up because we're still, I think from Canada perspective, I think it's the same for the States. The government is still throwing in money to people, right? So we haven't seen the windfall of when that windfall stops, what's going to happen with various businesses, whether if it's bankruptcies and different businesses going out of business,
Right.
and how that's going to affect the real estate component of people losing buildings and losing properties. So I think it's coming. I just don't know when.
Yeah, right. Yeah, interesting. So Tony, tell us about your book. You know, it's a great name,
Thank
Doorpreneur,
you.
similar to entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
And tell us about your book and how that came to be.
So the idea came after the moment we realized, like I said a while ago, when the landscaping company and the snow removal company surpassed our management company, and how much fun we were having building that. And we after that we had started another business, so our maintenance division. We had opened that up to the general public. So I'm like, then all these interesting things started to happen, and I'm like, how can I'm a big journaler, so I journal every day, do a lot of meditation and kind of personal work and
Sure.
and self-discovery type stuff. And as I was writing and writing and writing, this concept came up basically in my head. It's like, this whole system that we're doing, I'm wondering, would other people be interested in hearing and learning from what we're doing? And that evolved from idea, and then eventually was born into the book. So the book is a combination of strategy of how to build a great management experience, how to take the operational components of a management company, how to incubate new businesses and coming up with the ideas, and then how to turn those into successful businesses, all along bringing in components of life and business. It's like the combination of life and business. So I talk a lot about the business aspect of this, but I also talk about a lot of the components that you need to be able to keep the ship going in terms of your personal habits, self-development, keeping yourself healthy and fit, all these different ideas to be able to pull all this off. So I had been experiencing all these things throughout a number of years. And again, it was just kind of like, okay, I'm going to take everything that I do from my coaching, from the mentoring, the people that I've been working with, distill all this thing in a book so that I want to be able to take to the market, because I knew that what we did was working and I wanted to be able to take it to others. Yeah. So the book is exactly that strategy. What we did, kind of, I teach through experience. So everything that I do is basically then translated into content for my students, because throughout their journey, we've hit most of the issues that they will come up against, so that we're able to provide them with solutions and different perspectives to be able to look through those different and get through those different experiences.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's kind of like,
yeah.
I equate it to your lease. I have a residential lease that's about 10 pages long, and it's probably overkill, right?
Yeah.
But here's what happens. And I do it for a specific reason, because my clients, I teach them, hey, this is what it should look like. Take out what you don't need and, use what you need. But every time something happens along the way, you decide, oh, that should probably be in the lease, right? So it's interesting how that progression happens.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
it took a long time to get all these ideas into one spot.
Yeah, for sure. So here, on a little bit lighter note, tell us where in Canada you are. I know you're on the East Coast, but how far from the United States are you, and where are you exactly?
So I'm in Moncton, New Brunswick. So I'm about 15 minutes from the Atlantic Ocean.
Okay.
Prince Edward Island is very close by. Halifax is usually a destination that some people are familiar with.
Yep.
The closest entry to the US would be Maine. So I'm about 2.5 hours, 3 hours from Bangor, Maine. So
Okay.
the border crossover. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you're up there then.
Yep.
Interesting. Is it cold up there yet, or?
No, not yet.
Okay.
We had a blistering hot summer. Like,
did you?
Incredible. It was beautiful. We
it was like that in
so,
Chicago here too. So
yeah, no, it was very nice. And it's starting, the shift happened like last week, the temperature's dipping at night. So yeah, we'll get ready for the next season coming up.
So your favorite tourist attraction up there?
Oh, the beach, by far.
Beach.
The water. Yeah. The ocean.
Okay. Interesting.
I'm a big guy, ocean guy. I love the water. We have everything, again, 10-15 minute drive from here. So any boating activities, cottage life, anything that speaks to you in that, it's amazing.
And like you said, Halifax is a great tourist destination. So
Halifax is beautiful. Nice
yeah,
little spot. Yeah.
right, right.
Yep.
Favorite restaurant?
Ruth Chris.
Okay. Ruth
Yep.
Chris, not even the little neighborhood delicatessen, huh? Wow,
No,
good for
no.
you.
Ruth Chris has been always a favorite of mine.
Yeah, good, good. So how do people get a hold of you, Tony, if they want to get a copy of your book or learn a little bit more about you and what you're doing?
Yeah. So the best place would probably be on my website, doorpreneur.com. Within that site, they can get a very good feel of, who I am and what we're doing here with the Doorpreneur. Throughout there, you can get access to different links to the book. You can buy it pretty much anywhere on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and for chapters for those of you in Canada.
Yeah, great, great.
Yeah.
Well, Tony, I want to really thank you for your time today. I can't believe how quick the time went. I looked over at the clock and I went, holy cow, we've been at this for about 35 minutes. So,
I know.
yeah, so it went really fast this afternoon. And
Yes,
I
sir.
appreciate your time and being here. I've learned a lot, and I know my
Thank you.
listeners have learned a lot. And
Awesome.
you guys, if you have any questions or you want anything, Tony's information will be on our website. Go get his book, read his book. I know that the information is priceless, and you'll learn a lot from it. And you know how I feel about education and you getting better and being able to execute more thoroughly because you have more education. So everybody, glad you were here this week, and we will see you all again next Tuesday. Tony, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mike. Much appreciated.